Yo, 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 what's going on, guys? It's Buns, and welcome back to the Road to Gladiator. Tonight, hot off the press, the 7.1 November 15th hotfix changes have been announced and will be applied tomorrow on Tuesday. I thought I would do an audio-style podcast walking through and talking through the changes going for PvP, and also give my intake on how I think the changes are going to affect arenas. Now, right off the bat, a change that was expected from pretty much the entirety of the PvP World of Warcraft community, and Frost DK got their nerf. They got 10% strength reduced. Now, this was an absolutely necessary change. I know that a lot of people in the World of Warcraft community are tired of seeing Blizzard completely nerfing primary stats and stamina, but in the case scenario of Death Knight, everything about them was strong and overpowered. And after the changes that had come in the 7.1 early patch, they definitely needed the tone down overall. So 10% strength nerf, I don't think anyone is going to be complaining about that, except for the Rock'em Sock'em robots themselves, the Frost DKs, eat a dick. Then there was also a little bit of a blood boil change as well too, where the damage was increased, but who plays blood in PvP? For those of you guys that are doing duels or 2v2s or goofing around, it did get buffed a little bit, but nothing crazy on that mark. Now, Feral Druids also saw 20%. Feral Druid also saw 20% nerf to Rake in PvP. And I think that that was a fine change. I actually really didn't think that Ferals were going to get touched at all going into this patch. And if anything, I feel like their bleeds are strong, but if they are going to take something off, I'm fine with them taking 20% damage off of Rake. It is a high damaging ability, and having that on top of their bleeds once they have the momentum and pressure going on multiple targets, it can get overwhelming, so I think that this is a fine change. I actually really wasn't expecting anything on Feral particularly, so a little bit of a nerf I think is fine. I think the class is in a strong place, and that'll do something to just tone it down just a little bit, put it a little bit more in line. Now, another change that I'm sure that the World of Warcraft community is going to be happy with is that Fire Mages saw a primary stat increase of 10% intellect in PvP, and this is another one of those case scenarios where, in my opinion, I'm totally fine to see the primary stat increase rather than targeting specific spells, because I just felt that really Fire Mages were there for that Dragon Breath sheep, and they were CC botting, which is really weird because when you think about fire, you would think that they're doing way more damage than they actually are, but in reality, their damage across the board was just low. So 10% buff to the stat overall, I think it was a good change by Blizzard, and is going to help make fire feel more relevant, especially as well too because their stamina wasn't touched in the nerfs that happened to Frost Mages a couple of weeks ago. I think that you will see a lot more Fire Mages in comps where you may have seen some Frost Mages previously. Moving into Holy Paladin. Now, pretty much the top dog healer-wise has been Holy Paladin, with Resto Druid following as a close second, and they made two pretty big changes to Holy Paladin. The first being that they reduced their mana regeneration rate by 23% in PvP. One of the strongest things about Holy Paladin is it just would almost never go Even in these long fought games, they just were extremely mana efficient. So right off the bat, the 23% slap nerf on mana regeneration I think is great. It's going to help bring them back down to earth, because it just feels like in most case scenarios right now, what's wrong with Holy Paladins, right? There was no reason not to pick them. They're mana efficient. You can either choose to play with double sack or Avenging Crusader, which was the second ability that took a nerf as well too, where they now make it 110,000 mana, which in reality is about a tenth exactly of your mana pool, because you have 1.1 mil mana pool, so it's about a tenth of your mana pool. They wanted to make this spell, once again, something where Paladins are just not able to be at the top of their mana pool all the time and be super efficient. Honest to God, though, even though I think it's the right idea that they're putting some mana focus on this spell particularly, the way it works where you're just going through and using your melee abilities to generate spells, I don't think it's going to have that big of an impact, but it's something, and in longer games, they will definitely feel it once they're using it their second or third time, because it's a lot of mana to use right off the bat, but you're still being efficient while you are in that form because your judgments and your Crusader strikes are not costing you all that much, but it's a step in the right direction. Tagged along with 23%, I'll take it. Help bring Holy Paladins back down to earth and level out some other choices like Resto Druid or Resto Shaman. Now let's pause for a second. I'm really surprised that there was no changes to Priest whatsoever. I mean, Disc for sure needs some buffs, but especially Holy. Especially Holy. And I'm really shocked that neither of the two were touched, if not both. Holy has been obsolete the entire expansion. It's been on the island of misfit toys in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer land. Completely unplayable. I have no idea why it's not touched, and I feel bad for anyone that's even trying to play Holy in PvP because it's just not applicable. Really surprised didn't see any changes there. Curious to see in the 7.1.5 patch that's going to be coming up pretty soon what they are going to do for both Discipline and Holy Priest in their talent trees to help make them more viable and get them back into the arena scene, because I feel like especially for Holy Priest, they just need some more utility and more ways to deal with the up pace, fast tempo of 7.1 arenas right now. Very curious to keep my eyes on what some of those changes are going to be in 7.15 because I think that both specs need the help. Now, tailing on to the whole Priest rant, every single healer in the game has some sort of mobility to get away from people in the game. In this highly bursty melee cleave meta, Priest has absolutely nothing. I mean, look at Reciters, right? They have Displacer. They can swap forms, which not only gets them away from people, but also makes it hard for them for a lot of classes to CC or kill them in those forms. You also have Mistweaver Monks that can literally torpedo across the galaxy, Mistwalk, jump to partners, and roll, the most mobile healer in the game. You have your Shamans, which at the very least, they can jump with their Tornado into the Wizard of Oz and escape dangerous situations, and they also have Ghost Wolf speed mitigation as well too to help them out with that. And then finally, you have your Paladins, which can literally get on a freaking mount and charge off into the distance. So I understand that priests are meant to be this healer that is kind of tied down and has more CC, more control, and it lacks mobility because of that. But I personally feel like they need to see some sort of buffs to help them be able to get and deal with this melee pressure meta, and as well to give them more benefit out of their utility and being able to use spells like Fears, because right now they're not even able to get to the target because they're getting slowed down. So I have a few things in mind. One, straight up, you could just increase their healing by like 5-10% on both sides of the tree to help them deal. If they're going to be this tanky healer, give them more utility to do so. Let them be able to heal through some of these cleaves damage. Now, second, they do have Feathers, which has been a core part of Priest for a very long time, but right now it's not allowing them to get out of slows when they use it. When you use Feathers, allow the Priest to get out of slow, so that way they're able to feather themselves and maybe get away from the target, or use it aggressively to push in and try to get CC onto the healer with a Fear or something like that. Or finally, bring back an ability like Spectral Guise. Gives a Priest an opportunity to get away from the target and give themselves some distance when dealing with that. Those would be 3 different ways you could help Priest, and I'm really honestly shocked that Priest was not on this list. And I know sometimes that we like to see no class changes or things left to be unsaid, but I feel like Priest in general has really been at the bottom of the barrel. Not only Holy, but especially Disc is very limited in the comps that it can play with because of the utility and what it has available. Some ideas off the top of my head that I think would be helpful. Going on from there though, back on track, we have Rogue. Now, as a Rogue player myself, I was not feeling great about this change. Yeah, so Feint basically got reduced, and this is actually a pretty big nerf. There are a lot of AoE spells which you are able to mitigate. A lot of DK damage, a lot of Ret Paladin damage, a lot of Boomkin damage. There's a lot of damage you can mitigate by using Feint, so having that chunk down 20% on AoE damage definitely hurts rogues. And I get that we see the 5% stamina percent increase to compensate for that, which I definitely think is something that's good. I'm surprised there wasn't anything else tagged along with this, and I'm not really satisfied as a rogue player. I mean, mainly I'm going to be benefiting from the 30% single target when I'm choosing into my Feint talent, but I would have liked to see a little bit more for rogues in this area, because I already feel like it's scary for me to go out and try to get out into the middle, especially against caster cleaves, or if we're stacked up against these melee cleaves. Now my feint's reduced, so a lot of this AoE pressure we're taking against Windwalker DK, for example, that's still going to be amplified, and I'm going to be hurting a lot more trying to peel them off with kidneys and whatnot. I'm going to have to be very careful poking in and out. Surprised that Rogue didn't see a little bit more. Moving on to Elemental Shamans. Now, one of the abilities that was absolutely insane and overtuned, just like Controlled Chaos was at the beginning of the patch for Destruction Warlocks, was Stormkeeper. And that's the artifact for Ele Shamans. It was absolutely insane. I just got my Elemental Shaman up to 110 just a couple of days ago and hopped into some 3s. It was absurd. If you got Lightning Rod proc onto your main target and their team was stacked on top of each other, if you would chain lightning proc into all 3 of the targets on a lightning rod, I literally did 4 million damage in 3 chain lightnings onto the target when they were all grouped, and he died. Just evaporated. So, good for Blizzard for toning this down. I do feel like this is going to put Ele Shamans in a weird place, though, because I felt like they very much rely on that spontaneous burst damage from not only their artifact, but also Ice Fury. So yes, the 5% intellect does help to get them in the right direction of giving them a little bit more sustain, but I want to see how they're actually able to cope with this, because I think that the big thing with Ele Shaman was having that surprise factor of burst, and yes, it was very high. So I'm curious to see, with the 100% taken off, how it's still going to do, and will you have that same punch that's viable as it was before just a couple of days ago. Finally, looking at the last class here, we have Warlock. And I'm going to be really honest with you. I am surprised that Warlock received any sort of buffs. I'll be really honest. The UA Dispel is now increased by 100%, so if a healer dispels UA, they are going to take 100% more damage from that. I feel like Affliction Warlocks are in a very strong place right now, and this just put them even further down that path. So when I see the changes to class like Elemental Shaman that I'm like concerned about, and then I see this Warlock change, maybe it won't end up being too bad, right? Because in the first place, Ele Shaman can pair with an Affliction Warlock, and I think that that's going to be very strong, as well with Boomkins as well too. You may see a lot more Caster Cleave Rot meta going on as well too, throw a Feral in the mix. Yeah, I am not sure about the whole UA thing. It definitely did need a damage buff, but I'm not sure 100% was the number, right? It could have been something that was a little bit lower, so concerned about that. Already a lot of high damaging classes and comps you can play out there, like Feral Locke does an insane amount of damage. Feral Shadow Priest does very well as well too. Feral Boomkin, Feral Ele Shaman, so very curious to see how those comps fare after that buff to UA. And then on top of that, really? We saw an increased damage to Chaos Bolt? Really? Chaos Bolt is doing so much damage. One of the top comps on the ladder right now is Destruction Warlock and Windwalker Monk. That comp is insane how much damage it can do. And for Monk not being toned down whatsoever, I understand that sometimes when Blizzard's making these changes, they're not thinking about certain combinations of classes playing well together, but that comp is absurd. Absolutely absurd how much damage you can do burst with using Death and then lining it Chaos Bolt into it. I'm really shocked that Chaos Bolt received any sort of a buff. I felt like it was in a strong place after the nerf to Controlled Chaos, and that it was very much fine where it was. Warlocks are definitely getting back into the mix, if they were not already, which they were, so they're going to be flavor choice as well too going into tomorrow, Tuesday. Dudes, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the audio style podcast. I like doing these, especially getting them out nice and early so that you guys know what the changes are going into the hotfix. If you enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up down below. I will catch you guys on the next video or see you guys in the live stream during the afternoon. Peace, everyone. Keep it easy, guys. Yo, yo, yo. What's going on, guys? It's Buns, and welcome back to the Road to Gladiator. Today, I had an opportunity to finally be able to play one of the classes that I was looking forward to playing from the beginning of the expansion.